Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, the podcast dedicated to helping accounting firms stay ahead of the curve. Our mission is to provide you with the latest and greatest insights on cutting-edge tools, innovative marketing strategies, virtual CFO services, and alternative billing methods. Join us as we change the way people think about accounting.
We have a really good Modern CPA Success Show episode for you today. So we're talking to guest John Fonger, and John is a consultant, a coach, and a speaker. His work is based on a book called Work the System, and that's by Sam Carpenter, and he'll talk about that in here. But if you're thinking of your business or a client's business, and you're thinking of someone, and you've heard these terms before, I'm working more in the business than on the business, I'm too busy, I don't have systems in place, then this is exactly the episode for you. We've heard about this before. He'll reference a couple of other books that talk about this. It's a common problem. I think Josh described it in a simple way that people can say, yeah, I could see how that could be solved, and talks about both book and consulting that could help people with that, as well as just some practical ideas where you could probably do a lot of these things on your own. So as accountants, I know we often talk about being really busy. There's a busy season. We have too much to do. We're probably too engaged in the business if you're an owner and would like to step back and do things that you think help make the business work longer. And here's a solution that can help you do that. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. All right, welcome to this episode of the Modern CPA Success Show. I am Tom Waddleton. I work with Summit Virtual CFO by Anders. I'm a CFO. In my role, I have about 17 clients who act as their business consultant and also as their CFO. I'm really excited today because we have something I think can help people's clients and their practices if you work within a firm. Josh Fonger, welcome to our program today.
Hey, glad to be here, Tom.
Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? I let people know who they're listening to today.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the coach and consultant that really works with folks through this book right here, Work the System. Mm-hmm. So a lot of folks know about it. It's in its fourth edition. It's been around the world for the last 10 plus years. And we work with busy entrepreneurs, which is almost everybody. Maybe the unique thing is that the entrepreneurs we work with are ready for a change, right? And they know it's time to do things differently. And so they're usually ready to stop taking the easy path and maybe take the more mature path, which is to develop, the systems of the business. And sure. I've been doing this with Sam Carpenter for, I guess, over 10 years now. Before that, I was kind of a traveling business consultant in the flooring industry. So I fly out to companies and help them with their inside sales and outside sales and their projections, and I do some financial forecasts and help through bankruptcy, kind of whatever they needed. The problem I kept realizing is that my clients, when they would have success after I'd work with them, come back 6 months later or a year later, those problems would come back. And I realized I wasn't really getting to the root cause, right? And that's where the book, and what I do now comes in, is that it's about actually developing and documenting the systems of the business. And there's a very simple methodology we take companies and owners through. And if they follow it, this is we've measured over the years that naturally they're going to, and it's the premise of Sam's book, is they're going to make more and they're going to work less. And we find that a lot of people like that message. And so that's what companies mechanically do.
If we talk about who, so one of the things we really encourage people, and it's more accounting firms that are working things, is to really pick a niche and how much better you can do. So is there a niche where you're saying these are the people where the book really helps them take off? Or kind of what is that group?
I wish, we put the book out there, and I got really involved with Sam, I want to say around 2010. And, we had some law firms who were interested, and some appraisal firms, then a chiropractor, and then it was an SEO consultant, and this, and then we're like, well, maybe it's people in the construction industry, and it's really it's kind of like getting things done. It's anybody who wants to be more productive, more effective as an owner. This methodology works, and so people who are familiar with the book The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. That's the most common thing people say, is that the book Work the System is the next book Michael Gerber should have written, which is how do we actually do this? How do we actually not just theorize about it, but actually put these things into practice? And so so it really is it's a fundamental business block or business book that I think that everyone should read and they're going to take something from. I mean, I work with some high-tech companies that are scaling quickly. I work with some low-tech. I work with some farmers. They're just trying to keep things, one was like a sheep farmer, you name it. They all get a lot of value out of thinking differently, having a systematic strategy, principles, and procedures. And then my job, which keeps exciting, keeps me on my toes, is I get to take all those ideas, those system improvements,
right,
and then channel them into any client that I'm working with. I do a lot of personal consulting. And so, like I do have, like I mentioned, several accounting practices I'm working with right now. I usually always have at least a couple that I'm working with, but I'm also working with, a nonprofit. I'm working with a home flipper. I'm working with somebody that, they develop car washes, someone else has a writing company. So like I've got a lot of different companies I work with, but it's about me taking the principles and ideas, but of course they know their industry, right? So I don't really know it as much.
Yeah, not really a niche from an industry. From a company size, is there one? And I would assume this will work across any company, but is there a particular size where you're saying this is where it seems to be really an order of magnitude better for it than others?
Yeah. In terms of people who we actually work with, it's when owners become the yo-yo business, is what we call it. So basically, if you're in startup phase, you're now have to work with some startups, but usually they're just going to hustle and grind and figure it out. They make a lot of mistakes, a lot of experiments, and there are a lot of gyrations. And maybe they close down the company and reopen it under a different name, and they figure it out. And then once they have some kind of semi-consistent way of making some sales and delivering on those sales, maybe that's 6 months in, maybe it's a year or two in, and then they get into a groove, and then they will plateau at some point, and it's because the owner is the bottleneck. And so that plateau point might happen at $250,000, $500,000, $2 million, $5 million, wherever that plateau mark happens, where they can't really work any more hours. They kind of hit their max there, and the money seems to all be gone. So there's really no extra money to spend on more people. So it's not like I can't hire away this problem, and I can't work away this problem. And when things get tight, I'll work really hard and sales go up, but then the owner has to jump in and figure out how to deliver on those sales, and then service those sales, and then the sales go down, and then they're kind of they kind of hover at that point.
Yeah.
And so some companies can stay at that point the whole time, right? They can just kind of stay steady at whatever that number is, and then they go out of business, or the owner sells it or retires, whatever it is. But we work with companies that are ready to go beyond that point, wherever that number is. And so it's not so much how long they've been in business, it's more once they've plateaued and the owner personally reaches their breaking point. So it tends to be smaller companies, it tends to be private companies, not public companies. So most of them aren't board of directors or anything. So it's smaller private companies that the owner, like I just brought in a client yesterday that it's a cleaning service, right? So homegrown, I think they have 10 employees now, but now they're like, okay, we actually have to put some structure into place. We actually have to put some job descriptions and some hiring practices into place. And we need to have some checklists and some standards with how we actually clean these rooms. And it can't just be based on our gut and winging it and their friend of a friend. We have to actually make this a real business. And so that's usually when we get involved.
That's a great description. We often talk to businesses about the valley of despair. And it's kind of, you get to a certain size where that next growth is hard to get through. And the first one you mentioned is often the owner's wearing all the hats. You've expanded beyond that point. So when you start adding people, it's both expensive and you're carrying the company, but even when you can afford it, now communication gets to be a problem. But as you get that figured out, when you maybe go 3 or 4 times as big, now you've gotten that much bigger. And it seems to make total sense to say, well, that next valley is likely you've sort of outgrown, again, those systems that worked before. And it suddenly things that used to be one person, now it's 4, and communication has gotten to be one of the real challenges that's in there. So it's just interesting to hear you describe, and I can see pulling in an external person to say, help me figure this piece out.
Yeah, help me figure it out, and then help hold me accountable, right? Nowadays, information's cheap, it's everywhere. You can find out what to do, how to do it, anywhere you want to do it. It's more about, can somebody actually just help me do it and hold me accountable to do it, and then help me do it in the right sequence, and not just talk about doing it, but actually work through it. And so implementation is obviously critical with any idea. And I think that this is just another one of those business ideas that people are like, oh yeah, I really want to do that, but they have a hard time actually executing on. And so that's a big part of what I do.
Yeah. The two books you mentioned, we actually are big proponents of. So Getting Things Done by David Allen is one, and we actually had him on our podcast talking about that and how that could help service business, and then also eMyth.
Elevate your firm with the Virtual CFO Playbook, how to land $60,000 per year clients and provide a killer client experience. This comprehensive online series of modules provides you with the essential tools to create and deliver scalable VCFO services. Developed from Summit's successful approach, which propelled them from $500,000 to over $10 million in revenue in 10 years, this playbook will equip you with the skills to take your firm to the next level. Additionally, upon completion, you can receive 24 hours of CPE credit for the course. Ready to grow your firm? Enroll now at vcfoplaybook.summitcpa.net.
So I'm curious with those two, get it out of your head as a big getting things done piece. All the systems and things are big for eMyth. So your book, I'm guessing you're not saying go through those two first before you get to yours. Is that right? So how do you position yours relative to those two?
Sure. I mean, if business owners like to consume information, so you can do that in whatever order you want to.
Okay.
Sam's book, Work the System, which I didn't write, but I'm the proponent of getting it out there. It's a complete package in that it walks through. I'll just summarize it in just a minute here. It walks through a busy business owner, which is Sam Carpenter, in a real company, which is Centertel, which still exists today, where he was working 100 hours a week at work because he literally lived there. He slept there. He just worked all the time. There was a 24/7 answering service, and so pretty hellish environment. And so he had been just working his tail off for like 15 years with this business, and had reached a certain point where he just said, like, I just can't work anymore, and there's no extra money. I'm going to miss payroll. I've got to do things differently. And up until then, he realized that he enjoyed always being, the hero. So if the printer breaks, he can fix it. If your client has a problem, he can fix it. If he needs to do this, he could just jump in and do whatever needed to be done. And I think he had maybe 7 or 8 employees at the time. Okay. And he just realized, like, this can't work anymore. And so he thought he was just going to lose the business. And so in the book, he reaches that breaking point, and he has this vision in the book, or dream, where basically there's a table laid out, and on the table are a series of parts, all the little parts and pieces that make up his business. And his theory was, if each of these pieces that I see in my business, if they were all perfected like little machines, and I put them back together, maybe I could have a perfect business. And so that's what he went about trying to put that into place. And so as he was able to, through another miraculous event, make payroll, and so it's all detailed in the book there, he went about and fixed one system. And the system he chose to fix was depositing checks, and this is, maybe 2 decades ago, maybe longer than that now, depositing checks into the bank, which of course is a little bit easier nowadays. And because they got maybe 300 checks a month, maybe more than that.
Okay.
And sometimes they would get lost. Sometimes they didn't know who to account for, which account. And anyways, it was kind of a complicated mess. And so he spent maybe 3 hours a week doing that particular process every week. And then he realized, if I wrote down the steps to do this, could someone else do this? And of course, the answer is yes. And then he developed this system, and someone else ran the system, and he realized, I just saved 3 hours of my life for the rest of my life. Maybe there's another system I could develop and do. And then, so then he just kind of, got him thinking that he could actually just work himself out of a job by working those systems, hence the book, Work the System. And so as he went about doing that, and he details how to lead and how to manage and what the different systems are of your company. But he went from 100-hour work week to, now he likes to work, so he does maybe 2 hours a month with the business. He still owns it, but it still runs, and it's more profitable today than ever. I think his income's like 100 times higher than it was back then. So, but the point is, the company now runs itself and is built on these systems. And so I think it's a great story. I mean, people, whenever they read, they're like, okay, this is me. I'm at Sam right at this point right now in the book. Yes. And so they can relate to that. They can relate to that pressure. They can relate to being maxed out. And they can relate to the fact that they know they need to do things differently. They just don't know how. And then it just tells you what you need to put in place. You need to have a systems mindset. You need to have a strategic objective, a clear vision of where your company's going. You need to have general operating principles, the rules of how this company is supposed to run. And then you need to have procedures. And they need to be documented. They can't just be in your head. Mm-hmm. They can't just be, hey, my top sales guy is good at selling, so it's fine. Well, what if he stops working? He leaves. Right. Then your company's in trouble. And that's the way so many small companies are. Is they're one heartbeat away from disaster. And I work with a lot of those companies where that person left, or that person, sometimes they'll get pregnant and just not be available for a while, or mm-hmm. something like that will happen. A couple of companies I worked with, one of the general managers died abruptly, and no one knew what they did or how they did it. So just things like that. And so I wish it wasn't the case. I wish I worked with them before things were really bad, but usually I get them when they're bad, and then we put out those fires, then we start to build the systems.
Yeah, that's great. It being a story is probably really good. And as you described that, Josh, one thing I think of was I was at a conference with one of our owners, Jody, and met one of his peers, and we were talking to him. And for the first 10 minutes, I thought, this guy sounds incredibly successful, as he went through the different roles he had, and he had stepped into organizations and taken over as their CFO and then stepped back out and things like that. And it sounded great. And then toward the end, he said, and I'm really in trouble, he said, because I've grown this company and no one can do what I do. And I can't step away, and I can't grow it. And I've been thinking about systems for years, and I can't do it. And for me, it was such an instant change where I went from, I was like, anyone wants to be you, to, you've got a real problem on your hands and you're seeing it. But so I would guess, I'm getting to a question, you're going to walk in and say someone's working 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week. And what you're telling them is, let's focus on systems. And the first step is probably, how do I add on top of that to do something different? Is that one of the challenges you work on?
Oh yeah, definitely. So one of the first modules we take everyone through is this exercise called making time, because mm-hmm. there's time in everyone's schedule. They just don't know it. And I try to break apart what they do and isolate those separate things and say, actually, you don't need to do this anymore. This could be automated. This could be delegated. And then we pick a system, and then we, stop getting involved with that particular system, and so to free up some time, some capacity. Because to make this shift will take some time. And it's funny because the accounting firms I took on, I brought them both on, I think it was, I want to say it was like February or March, but they were both like, it's going to start getting really busy here. And then it was like, it was the tax season, and it was very busy, but they still stuck with it. And it was because we build capacity quickly, but so we do help people see that. And it's always something very obvious to me, maybe because I've done this a long time, but also just because I'm an outsider, and maybe someone else would see it too. One that everyone would understand is I work with this home flipper, and one of the things that he does, and he generates a lot of revenue flipping homes, is that he would do these emergency runs to Home Depot or Lowe's and pick up materials and for the different job sites, and drive it to the job sites and bring out the materials, because it's a big rush, because, hey, we're out of this, or we need lumber, or whatever it is. And I said, so there's so-called emergencies every week? He's like, yeah, sometimes like 2 or 3 times a week. And I'm like, could they be prevented? And of course the answer is yes. And then I said, now, is it possible that someone else has the skill set and ability to drive to Lowe's and pick up material and drive it to these job sites? He's like, well, it's just so hard. I'm like, do you think I could do it? Like tomorrow? And he's like, well, there's just so many things that go on. I'm like, okay, so we're going to document a system and how to, because he had a special account there and a special credit card file and this, that. I'm like, but you can develop. And so, within a week he did. And then he had someone, was $20 an hour, who had a truck, who could do it, who was reliable, and just dropped off materials for him. And of course, they realized they didn't have to have so many emergencies. So the emergencies were dropped, and they had someone else do the running. And all of a sudden this guy had like 5 hours more a week. It was like,
I would say it's a huge amount of time, right?
yeah. And it's like, that wasn't, it cost him a little bit of money, right? He had to pay someone else to do it, but
Sure.
it was totally worth it because once owners realize that the value of their time to the business is, whether it's $200 or $300, $500 an hour, whatever it is, everyone else in their entire company costs less than that. So really, anything possible that they can get someone else in their company to do is worth it, right? Because their time as the owner is the most valuable time. And so I'll hear this all the time, is they'll say, oh, my employees are busy. I'm like, well, you're busy and your time is actually worth even more than their time, right? So the whole point is owners do have to free up their time. And when I'm going through this analysis, usually the other obvious thing is that things that owners are supposed to be doing, business development, innovation, trying to recruit and work on the culture and the strategy and kind of looking at the landscape, 1 year, 5 years on the road. Usually no one's doing any of those things. The owners are just doing the day-to-day things. And I'm like, well, this company's great, except there's no leader. There actually is no CEO. There actually is no owner, because no one's doing those things. And that's why you're still in the same spot. And so they have to unlearn some of the things that have gotten them to this success point and then learn new skill sets that they're not used to. And so it's a transition. I mean, the systems mindset that Sam and I talk about, you can have it in an instant in terms of seeing your world as a collection of systems, but the implementation is what takes some time. And that's what that's what I get to do with the coaching and consulting. Just kind of walk with people through the transition so they don't turn back to what they're used to and actually stick with it until it actually really works for them.
Yeah. And you mentioned the busy season, which is one thing that we have or see. So we do a lot of consulting with other accounting firms and helping them with moving to a virtual CFO. The number of times we've heard people saying, I'm going to ramp up the marketing like when the busy season's done. But the busy season takes so long. And then from CPAs, you'll often hear, well, there is no more busy season. We're just busy all year because there are so many extensions and things like that. And so not surprising, you'll talk to someone a year later and they're saying the exact same thing. And it may be something like, I'll put out a blog post once every 3 weeks or something that seems small. And you're like, okay, it's been a year and you haven't been able to carve out that 1 hour to do that. So I can see the value of that. Accountability, I'm going to follow up and get those things done.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think you probably noticed it too. I mean, the accountant that I was talking to this morning, he's on this, and it's a new client, he's on this routine where he'll work, whatever, normal morning, normal day, but then he'll go back home, but then he'll go back to work, again, back to the office from like 7 until 10:30 at night, every night, or 11. And it's like, well, like, how long can you do that, right? And you still be trying to get those returns out, the ones that were in extension. And so, there usually is the capacity, and you've already kind of mentioned it, is it's a lot of things. You do consulting. When you do consulting, you sometimes just realize, hey, you know what? The issue is you have a pricing issue, and that was the case in this particular client, is they were just priced too low. They hadn't been raising prices the last 5 years. So, inflation, cost of labor, everything else is going up. And that's why they're having to put all the hours in themselves. There's no profit left. And so, anyways, there's always some obvious things from an outsider that people inside just can't see. And I think that's what's one of the big values for people like you and me bring, is like, hey, I know you think you've hit a wall, but there are opportunities still.
Yeah. When you work with accounting firms, are there common certain systems that you can give people a good idea when you say system, what you're thinking of that are normal ones you focus on?
Yeah, so it's probably the easiest way for anybody is to think about the client lifecycle. Like, there probably is some repeatable system or effort that takes for someone to even be aware you exist. And so once they see you, there's probably some system that actually repeatedly lets them know to call you or contact you. And then at that point, there's probably some regular repeatable thing that has you connect back with them, maybe a phone call, email, appointment. And then at that point, this is kind of like a selling system, right? And at that point, maybe there's a consultation, there's some kind of discussion, and then a presentation, and then they sign on the dotted line, they become a client. like there's a process there. Each of those steps, we would say, is, for one, it's a macro system, the client lifecycle. But each one of them is a system of repeatability as well. So like hiring an employee, like how you do an interview. Every single time you do an interview, you're going to do interviews again and again and again. How about you just document that process, and then you'll get really good at interviewing, right? And so the point is, we want them to get not just wing every single thing that they do, but actually get really good at the things you do. And maybe that means you need to do less things. But if you do them better, you'll be able to charge more for them, and you'll have more capacity to get more of those clients on. And so that's, again, what we're trying to do is simplify companies, reduce complexities. It's one of the keys to Sam's book that people don't always think about, is that because he focused so much on being the number one in his industry as an answering service, he can charge a lot more money than anyone else. Because once you're the best at something, people are like, well, I could use this firm or that firm, but I just want to use the best firm. So I'm just going to pay a little bit more, because relative to all of their expenses all year long, it's not that big of an expense. And so, and because they're very good at what they do, they can do it for half as much work as other companies do, right? So they charge twice as much, but they do it for half as much work because they are very systematic about it, right? And so that's kind of the key thing there. But yeah, I forgot your original question with regards to accounting firms, but the separate systems. So yeah, there's
different systems. Yeah, so I think you've described your process, taking them through that life cycle, and I assume through that, which are the most important, which are the most painful, which are you involved in that maybe you shouldn't be as involved? Is it things like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I think for a lot of the small accounting firms that I've noticed is that they think they need to be involved in meeting the client face to face if it's a localized accounting firm, and building this relationship with them. And so instead of the client wanting to work with their firm, the client then wants to work with them, and that's a problem from the get-go. And then also being overly responsive. And so instead of the client coming in, then they're going into your machine that you're in control of.
Right.
The client's dictating how you run your company. So like one recently, I just said, hey, if anybody wants to work with you, current client or prospective client, they have to book on your calendar a specific time. And if it's a non-client or it's a special thing, they have to actually pay for the time. As opposed to people calling you, emailing you, interrupting you whenever they want to, whenever they feel like it, probably not paying you for your advisory services, which are the most valuable. And you're just always in reaction mode, like you're their slave, and you're like an employee in their business. But instead, this is your business. So being in control of your business is a good thing, not out of control. And so the whole point is I try to get them to know, like, how about you run your business for you, and then your clients need to enter your ecosystem, right, on your terms. Now, that could be great terms for them, but they have to be great terms that are efficient for you too. And so just setting up those kind of barriers and boundaries where like someone else can do a large portion or maybe all of the onboarding. And the more of that, again, that can be systematic, the better, as opposed to every single time it's random, every single time it's urgent, every single time it's, requires the most highest experienced person to be involved in. You actually want to, how do we set up our onboarding system that the least experienced receptionist can run it, because we have simplified it so much. And that's the goal, is always to figure out how to make it the simplest so that any good person could do the work.
Yeah. And I'm sure what you would find is then clients end up being more satisfied when what they get is a predictable level of service and a response time that they expect, versus at least what you described before is this kind of putting out fires mode, which if you got 10 fires, sometimes they probably get a really quick response and sometimes longer. And what you might find is somewhere in the middle, if they know what the response is going to be, they're probably happy with that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about being consistent with it. Exactly. Yeah. So if they know that you always respond in 2 days, well, then that's great. Or 1 day. But if it's like, hey, sometimes it's within 1 minute, and sometimes it's half hour, and sometimes it's 2 days, and then they can't trust the relationship as much. And so, I think that the consistency is a huge part of it. And I find that for localized firms, the issue is that people just pop in like they used to because they know you and they've known you for years and this and that. And so instituting new boundaries and standards seems to be difficult as well. And so sometimes, getting the owner to move to a different space or getting them to not physically be there or things like that can help make the transition to getting all the emails funneled to a standard email address, not their personal email address, because these people that are used to just working with the owner, they need to get used to not doing that anymore. I mean, when the CPA firm's got, 500 or 1,000 or 3,000 accounts, it just doesn't work anymore. Like, it just doesn't function. And in the end, the people want good service, and so they'll go with the change, but the owners just need to stick to it and make it happen.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. So as I hear systems, we're going to design it, we're going to document it, that can sound sort of overwhelming and complicated. This is probably where you help, but I'd love it. Maybe it is, but maybe you'll tell me, okay, people probably do overthink this. And I would think accountants, if you have a chance to overthink, we're probably the group that does.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of spreadsheets.
Exactly.
So, I try to make it first off, it doesn't have to be painful. And it also, it's more of a way of, first, it's a way of thinking, and it's a way of life. And that's probably the number one initial aspect, is if you have clarity of focus and the principles, and your team understands that, hey, we're not going to just literally this morning, the same issue where, hey, we just interrupt the owner whenever we feel like it. It's just, our system is that we really need the owner for lots of different things because it's chaotic in this company. Okay, here are your time slots in the morning, and here are your time slots in the afternoon. Otherwise, you can't interrupt me because I'm focused. Okay, wow, we just feed a ton of, it's more of a systematic. Every day we know what's the same. He knows when we're going to interrupt him. We know when we can bring our questions. Now we have a system to how we're going to flow through our day instead of constant interruptions, right? And so it's developing what are the best practices and systems of your daily cadence, when do we have appointments? When do we not have appointments? When do we have focus time? When do we answer calls? Just so it's trying to get into that level of initial, just looking through your day, and then it's looking through the work, and then it's just start small. Like, you're not going to document 400 procedures, and I won't go through a long story about a company that wanted to do this, but you're just going to start with the one that matters most. And so if you got someone who, we had this happen where there was an accounting firm closing, and then another one was going to be taking on a bunch of their clients, 200 clients at once, So, okay, well, you're going to be onboarding a lot of clients. Well, you should probably document that process. To start with an outline. Okay, what's going to happen 2 weeks before, 1 week before, day of, day after, week after, 2 weeks after? Like, what are things? Okay, now what are those things that we can not have the owner do? Okay, Shelly can do this, and Julie can do that, and okay, and do we all know how to do that? Okay, here's what actually needs to happen, and then work through that, and then you're going to find out, okay, instead of the owner literally onboarding 200 clients by themselves, all of them, hey, we can actually divide the work because we know who's doing what and the separate pieces that make it up. And it's like, well, can we do that better? Well, can we do that better? And then once it's documented the first time, which I always recommend the first time you document it, do it as simple as possible. Don't try to do massive innovations. Don't try to perfect it. Just say, like, what are we doing right now? Now we're doing it this way. Great. Now that we all know that, the first thing that's going to happen is people are going to look at it and say, oh, I'm not doing it that way, or I'm doing it differently. Okay, well, okay, I didn't know that. That's good to know. How are you doing it? Then they will add their ideas to it. And then we always have a principle, the best idea wins. Okay, so now we all learned a better way to do it. Great, and we've all committed strategically that at this company, we all want to do things the best way. So we're all going to conform to this best way. It's in writing. We all collaboratively wrote. Simple enough. But then it's going to be a few weeks go by. Hey, actually, it's a faster way to do this. Actually, instead of taking an hour for those client meetings, we can actually do those in a half hour, because we just, working with this hearing aid center, and they've done an hour and a half presentations for every single client. And I said, well, Is there a way to do it faster? Turns out you can do it in 45 minutes. It's like you guys have been doing 1.5-hour assessments for 20 years now. Well, we just always done it this way. It's like, the point is that maybe you could onboard the clients instead of in the office, and you could do them virtually, instead of doing it this, and it could be short. And the whole point is they need to first figure out, what are we doing? Can we always make sure we at least have some standardization of what we're doing? And then could we do it faster? Could we do it higher quality? Can we do it in a way that it's going to be more profitable? It doesn't mean you have to, this is what Sam always says, that the systems of your business are already there. So it's not like I'm going to come in and say, hey, we have to create systems out of scratch. It's like, they're already happening. Like, you're already processing people's payroll. You're already, getting their P&L and balance sheet set up. You're already doing it. Like, the work is already happening. Now we're just going to get better at the work by standardizing it and optimizing it. So it's not like we have to revolutionize your business all at once. We're going to revolutionize little pieces of your business one at a time. And that's what's going to make the difference. And that's the hard work that most people aren't willing to do, but it's the only work that's going to ultimately allow the owner to delegate more and more away and know that the quality is going to stay the same or get better with time. And that's the key, is like, if you would like to have a life outside your business and grow, the work is going to have to stay the same quality or better. Right. And you're going to have to be able to watch it less and less and less. And that's going to only happen if the culture and the strategy and the systems are set up this way. And and not everyone wants that. Some people, they want to be in the mix every day. And I just don't work with them, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So anyways.
They'll continue on. So then, with this idea of sort of continuous improvement, is there a foundational piece that you put in place as you start around after action reviews, or reviewing and getting things documented and then iterating to make it better? It sounds like something that you get the whole team used to doing.
Yeah. I mean, there's, read all the books, and the larger the company is, you got thousands of employees, then there are lots of these really important structures you have to put in place. But usually when the companies are smaller, their gut's going to kind of just tell them where the priorities are, like where the fire is, where the problem is, like where the issue is. Like, we used to be getting, 500 leads a month, and we'd be getting like 10 leads a month. I think we need to investigate the systems that set this up. Then they'll be able to sniff out where the issues are. Now, once the core systems of the business are documented and they have been used, and there's hopefully just regular improvements being made, then we'll set up as measurement systems. And so, like, the core things of your business you do want to measure, and then you'll be able to identify when things are going haywire. And you can also set goals and then drive towards them and say, hey, we need to put some gasoline on this particular system because it needs to drive us to these numbers going forward. And so you can start to really control where your business goes, because the systems that delivered the results. And so therefore you can, modify those systems to deliver different results, because you actually have some knowledge of what it is, as opposed to just, we want to grow, and so we all need to work harder, right? That's a little bit too generic. Right. And so, so also, whenever I finish up with a client, we want to end with maintenance systems, because if you do develop systems, whether it's 10 or you've documented 500, you want to look back on them, ideally in the 6 months to 12-month range, to pull them back up and say, hey, are we still doing this way? Is there a better way to do this? Is there a faster way to do this? Is there a way to improve the client experience or make it simpler, or improve our experience doing this? Is there a way to use technology? Is there a way to automate it? Just going to look at it. And then sometimes it's just, we still change the printer toner the same way we did last year. Okay, no big deal. On to the next one. So most of them are just like, it's still the same. We still order lunch the same way. So there's nothing there. But some of them there is, and that can be the turning point. I like to share the story with a small machine shop that I was working with, where they just documented the shift change, between first shift and second shift. And there's 20 employees on the machines the first shift, 20 on the second shift, and they had a 15-minute overlap.
Okay.
And once we documented that overlapping of shift, where they're handing off the work and what they're doing on the different tool sets to the next thing, we realized that actually there was a lot faster and better way, and it only had to be a 5-minute overlap, not 15-minute overlap. And so that 10 minutes of overlapping time times all of their employees times, I don't know if they were 7 days a week or not, but they were open a lot. It was $100,000, like $100,000 of wasted payroll.
For 10 minutes.
A year, every year, and you've been doing this way for decades. Like, so sometimes it's not the problem of the business. It's just, hey, we could do this better if we just actually took some time to focus in on it. And so everyone already says they're working hard. Everyone says that they have a process, but once you document it and you have some focus time on it, there's always a better way to do it.
Yeah, that's great. So for people who are listening on, yeah, I'd like to be in the category of I've done this well, but I'm probably more in the category of need this. What is your usual recommendation for like very first step that people have? Is it it's read the book, it's reach out to me, kind of what does your take that first step look like?
Well, on podcasts, I always tell people to go to WTSenterprises.com because they can get the summary of the book downloaded for free. And of course, if they want to contact me, they can do that there. We've got links to other resources and business systems assessments. And I always tell everybody, get the book. You can go to workthesystem.com, which is Sam Carpenter's website. He also has the book summary, and you can get the book on Kindle or audio, wherever you want. But it's, I would say, do it, put that on your reading list, go through it, listen to it, think about it, consider it. But if you want some help, then just connect with me.
Yeah. And the way you've described it, the iterative approach of let's start here, we'll get you the first example, someone got 5 hours in their week. So that's a huge benefit, but that allows you to then start moving on to other things. And at least what I don't think I heard is we're going to come in and sort of stop the whole business for a while, redo everything, and then restart. Not a very practical approach, but someone said, yes, I could work my way there.
Exactly. Yeah. You start where you are and you make it better. Yeah. You can't stop the train. It's already going.
That's excellent. Well, Josh, thank you very much. Like I said at the beginning, I hope that people will think of this for their own business. We've got accountants who are very forward-looking, but at the same time, they need help. And as they work with their clients, and they've got clients who they probably look at and say, wow, every time I meet with this person, what they tell me is working too hard, thought I could make more, whatever that looks like, that they've got a tool that they could recommend to people that could help them and their clients.
Yeah, no, sure. Definitely. I'd recommend that. And just tell them to read the book. And that's great.
Good. Well, thank you very much for your time today.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website, summitcpa.net, to get more tips and strategy for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.